Have you ever been frustrated trying to position elements on a web page, only to find they just won't cooperate? If that's you, you're in the right place. Today, we're diving into a common CSS issue: how to get an absolutely positioned element above a relatively positioned one. I totally get it. It can be really annoying when you think you've set everything up correctly, but the elements just don't stack as you expect. You're definitely not alone in this struggle. Many developers face this issue. Here's the specific situation we're looking at. One user asked, "How do I get a position absolute element above a position relative one?" They shared a fiddle where they have an absolutely positioned element with a z-index of 2 and a relatively positioned element with a z-index of 1. But the absolutely positioned element isn't showing above the relatively positioned one. Sound familiar? Let's figure this out together. So what's going on here? The issue arises because the stacking context is influenced by the parent element. Even though the absolutely positioned element has a higher z-index, it is still contained within the relatively positioned parent, which affects its visibility. And stick around. At the end, I'll share a quick tip that can help you avoid this issue in the future. To ensure that the absolutely positioned element appears above the relatively positioned one, the user should first check the stacking context. The z-index property only works within the same stacking context. Next, the user can modify the CSS of the relatively positioned element. By setting its z-index to a lower value or removing it altogether, the absolutely positioned element will be able to stack above it. Now, the user should ensure that the absolutely positioned element has a higher z-index than any other elements it needs to overlap. This can be done by confirming its z-index is set correctly. Finally, the user can test the changes in their browser. By refreshing the page, they should see the absolutely positioned element displayed above the relatively positioned one. Fun fact, did you know that CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets? It's like a fashion show for your website, but sometimes the models just don't want to walk the runway. Now let's look at the answers provided by other users. An alternative solution provided by another user involves wrapping the two divs in a new container. By adding a position relative to this wrapper, the absolutely positioned element can be correctly placed above the relatively positioned one. Now, let's shift our focus to a different response. An alternative solution provided by a user is to simply remove the z-index property from the relatively positioned element. This allows the absolutely positioned element to appear above it without any conflicts. Here's that quick tip I promised. Always be mindful of stacking contexts when working with z-index. Understanding how they work can save you a lot of headaches down the line. And there you have it. You should now be able to position your elements correctly. Remember, understanding how z-index and stacking contexts work is key. If you found this helpful, hit that subscribe button for more tips, and don't miss our next video where we tackle more CSS challenges.